All right, I'm going to see if this works. I had to turn my settings way, way down. But I, like many people, have a recommended, videos feed on the right-hand side of my YouTube as I watch videos, and all sorts of strange things end up there. And for me, it was, of course, the new young white nationalists of YouTube that have sort of found their voice here, and I just couldn't help. It's like watching a car wreck. I couldn't help but watch and watch and watch and keep watching car wrecks. And so these are my 7 questions for this new burgeoning movement, because I have so many existential and pseudo rhetorical questions. You don't have to take them as hostile or serious, but these are just questions that I always had when watching a lot of these videos that I never feel get answered, and it would be nice to get some answers to these questions. So let's see, get going here. Question 1 is being white a biological fact, a cultural identity, a culture stemming from its genetics, from biological facts, or are the genetic facts stemming from environment or culture, or even I've heard geography is causing the differences between races of people. So what is it? Is it a nature or a nurture thing, or some combination of both? Because it gets spoken about in a lot of different ways. So I'd just be curious to get an answer to that one. How many races are there? That's question 2. Total. How many races are there? And are these genetic, or are they cultural too? Are they determined by their environment or their geography, or are they biologically different, or is that all the same question? 3. What markers have to be present, or what markers have to be absent to identify an individual or a group of individuals as being authentically white, or authentically any of the other races? And who is included in being white? How is this determined? I've seen like this map of like Y-DNA haplogroups and their distribution rates across different European countries. But so like, are all of those people, do they all count as white? Or because most people I know, they think some percentage of those are white and some percentage aren't. So, you know, I'm just curious about that kind of stuff. How do you tell, if somebody's white or not white, or just an imposter? Number 4, how are we to categorize the mixed race or biracial or multiracial people? And what about the prospect of future interracial relationships in these white countries? Are these prohibited? Are these to be frowned upon? Punished? What do we do about miscegenation in white countries? So should there be laws against that, or should just people just frown upon it generally? Perhaps some positive benefit can be given to pure white couples, but not to other couples. They're left to fend for themselves. What are we supposed to do about people who break race laws and race rules? So that's question 4. Question 5. Where can I find some kind of reliable or standard research on this topic being done in the 21st century by any kind of colleges or universities? And if you think that's unfair, because I understand, it's a big conspiracy and all this kind of stuff, if you think that that's unfair, maybe just a think tank. Is there a think tank that people can all refer to? Because it seems like there's a bunch of guys with self-published books, and they're not saying things that are consistent with one another, and they're not referring to the same documentation that answers some of the existential questions. Not, hey, let's assume there are races, and now let's study the difference between these groups. But what does it mean to be a particular race or not, or white or not, or and these kind of questions. Who can I go to for research? 6. Are the colonies of Europe and their offshoots also white countries? So like Australia, I live in the United States, Canada, parts of South America, so on and so forth. Are these also white countries? South Africa? And what, if anything, should be done with or about the European diaspora in these colonial and former colonial states? I mean, they're not in Europe. I mean, the United States is not contiguous with Europe. Hasn't been for a few millennia. So are these white countries, and do they get to stay, or should white nationalists and so forth try to call people back to Europe, or should, call people back to their ethnic identities, or whatever that may be, if they even possess a strong ethnic identity anymore? And then finally, kind of ties in to question 6. Question 7, what rights, if any, belong to displaced or colonized native peoples in these countries? Do they have a right to run for office? Do they have a right to vote? Do they have certain privileges or protections that are owed to them? If none, what argument could be made against the demographic displacement by whatever means of white people by non-white people in European countries? Because most of this stuff, I find, this white nationalist stuff, kind of comes from this fear of a cultural or a demographic shift going on in Europe, where Europe is feeling less and less European, whatever that means by however you fall on some of the questions I've been asking here. So because it seems to me that if white people get to keep South Africa and they get to keep the United States and Canada and all this other stuff, and these are white countries, then why can't, I mean, I'm not arguing that I want this, or this would be a good thing, or that I would prefer one or the other, but why couldn't Europe presumably be the western half of the caliphate? Why would that be wrong? And if sort of the European nationalism is okay and is right. So I'm stalling a little bit because I want to be able to land this plane without crashing, because I'm doing this all in one shot. But those are my 7 questions. I think these are questions that should be asked internally to the movement, because I don't think that these questions all have the same answers. I think that if this video ever gets around to this circle, because they are pretty darn responsive, I'll get a lot of answers, and hopefully they'll be somewhat consistent with one another. Until then, I'll show off some of my other planes some other time. I hope you enjoyed these questions, and please put your answers below. Like if you want to see more wonderful high-flying Kerbal videos, or weird existential questions for different groups and identities on YouTube. So good luck, and I'm serious. I would like to know the answer to some of these questions. Have a good night, day, or whatever it is, as it were, where you live.